Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of The Washington Examiner. Please, if you're joining us on YouTube, like and subscribe to our channel and keep on adding to our accumulating viewership. I'm joined, as I usually am, by Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent. And Byron, let's talk about the best gossipy story of the week so far, and that is the interview, or the several interviews that were with Susie Wiles that were published by Vanity Fair and picked up by everybody else. She described Elon Musk, for example, as an avowed user of a particular drug. She described the president as having a kind of alcoholic's personality. What's been the reaction to this, and what were the other things that were said?
Well, the reaction among the president's supporters and among Republicans is, why in the world did the White House and Susie Wiles give such incredible access to Vanity Fair?
Right.
And then Susie Wiles gave 11 interviews to Vanity Fair over the course of a year, 11 interviews. And then when the piece comes out, and you'll be shocked to know it's somewhat negative, Susie Wiles, she's surprised. And this is really disingenuous what Vanity Fair has done, and that Susie Wiles, is just beginning to think that maybe they just wanted to make the Trump White House look bad.
Yeah.
And you think, Mike, what were you thinking? So that's the big question. There's no really good answer to it right now. The president is said to be not all that concerned about it. Even though really the whole White House just opened up for Vanity Fair. They had the reporter in, they had the photographer in, they had J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Susie Wiles, Stephen Miller, Dan Scavino. I mean, they had James Blair, they had the entire power structure posing for pictures.
Right.
And it makes absolutely no sense.
But so the president must have known about this. I mean, if the vice president is there, if the entire top brass of the White House is there, the president must have known. He's a bit inclined himself, isn't he, to give interviews to, he was in the past, to give interviews to like the New York Times, which he must have known was going to be a negative, was going to portray him negatively, and to others. He kind of likes to go for those New York publications which don't like him, because perhaps he's from New York. Would this have played into it into this case?
That's what I was going to say. You have to remember the president is a New Yorker, and he grew up reading the New York Times, and being covered in the New York Times means you've made it. You're something. Now, of course, being president of the United States should give him enough satisfaction along those lines, but the president doesn't mind going into negative media territory. I mean, how many interviews has he done that he knew going in with CNN or ABC or the New York Times? He's known going in that it was going to be pretty darn negative, and he's okay with that because he feels like he can handle it, and oftentimes, usually, he can.
Yeah.
So, with this, my guess is the president's just not all that worried about it. He realizes that everybody in Washington is going to be, talking about it. And that's kind of a win-win situation for everybody. Vanity Fair loves it. The press loves it. And the cover of Vanity Fair is the top officials of the White House sitting around the table looking like they're in charge of the country. So what's not to like from the president's point of view?
Well, I guess. I mean, as soon as it came out, it was, particularly in the way that it was marketed, it was evidently a kind of hit job, and it was all of the most pithy quotations were compressed into a single paragraph and distributed on social media, which of course is good marketing by the publication. So clearly wanted to be negative, but when the president was asked about it, he did have that kind of nonchalant, breezy attitude about it. He was asked about, for example, the description of him as having an alcoholic's personality, and he said, well, that's probably true. And I've talked before about why I don't drink, because his elder brother was a drinker and died prematurely. So it's not as though the subject of the president and of alcohol and what Susie Wiles, as I understand it, was saying was he has the personality and thinking he can do absolutely everything. So he certainly seemed to take a pretty breezy attitude, didn't he?
He did. And I just don't think the alcoholic's personality thing was really a huge news. It did a lot of news organizations made it a big deal, but I don't think it was that big a deal for reasons that you've just explained. And by the way, somebody who thinks he can do everything, if you've gotten elected president of the United States, there's some basis for thinking that. Now, there was some real substance in this that I think observers of the White House will find very interesting. Obviously, Susie Wiles was very critical of Elon Musk and the whole Doge effort, the way Doge handled um, USAID and PEPFAR and other humanitarian programs that were handled out of USAID before Doge came along. She was critical of some of the immigration enforcement that they've had. She was critical of a number of other things that Trump has done because you remember these 11 interviews were spaced over the whole course of the Trump administration so far. So there's this big ugly scene in the in the Oval Office with President Zelensky, and so she talks about that. By the way, she would not have had cameras in there, which is probably a smart idea.
Mm-hmm.
So she was critical about a number of decisions that had been made. She was critical of Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, for inviting some I guess influencers, conservative influencers in, and allegedly giving them the Epstein files, which is a bunch of retreads, things that everybody already knew, but creating this idea that there was this big mysterious Epstein file and that Bondi had seen it on her desk and all of that stuff. So she was actually quite critical of a number of people, and that will have some repercussions inside the administration, but not in terms of, a big story that dominates the news for a long time. Just don't see that happening.
So, but the repercussions. Let's just stay with them for a minute. I was going to ask you precisely that, what the repercussions would be, and will the repercussions be that the administration, most particularly the president, is critical behind the scenes of Susie Wiles for doing this, and indeed for some of the others for doing this? Or will Susie Wiles perhaps be somewhat pleased about getting her criticisms out, and that this is perhaps to some extent about her trying to make sure that she can be in charge of the staff in the White House, and that that she kind of cracks the whip a little bit? What will come from this?
Yeah, well, I did not know this story was in the works. I don't think barely anybody in Washington or in the White House knew it was in the works. So when it comes out, I was really quite surprised doing it, thinking it was a huge mistake, and I still think it was a big mistake for a chief of staff to do. Um, because there's a vanity aspect of it. By the way, the Vanity Fair reporter did talk to a number of other people, but they didn't say much.
Right.
They knew the Washington trick of sitting down for the interview, talking for an hour, and saying nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew
Mm-hmm.
how to do that, but she didn't handle it that way. So I was very surprised by it, and I wondered if this could be the beginning of the end for her
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that there will be people other than the president who are unhappy with this. I will say that they were prepared for this, and the defense of Susie Wiles that went on in the several hours after this story dropped was incredible. I've never seen a defense that spans the entire executive branch, all of the big appointees, all the cabinet secretaries, everybody tweeting statements of support for Susie Wiles, and you thought Susie Wiles has to think, "Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of clout here."
Yes.
Um, but everybody knows it's a constituency of one. Right now, he seems to be unhappy, perfectly happy. But later, if he gets unhappy, he may start to hold this against her. You never can tell.
Right. So Byron, let's turn to another subject which you just mentioned, and that is the Epstein files. You have written recently about what looks like Democrat desperation in returning to the subject and doctoring the evidence to try and inculpate President Trump. What have they done, and how do you interpret this?
Yeah, I may be one of the few people who senses Democratic desperation in this, but clearly, what Democrats on Capitol Hill would like to do is to produce incriminating evidence that shows that Donald Trump somehow was engaged in Jeffrey Epstein's wrongdoing, or at least he had knowledge of his wrongdoing. Something they can show to damage the president. And so far, we have, for all this talk about the hidden Epstein files, and there is more to be released, we already know a lot about the Epstein case. There's been a lot of litigation. We've had transcripts and depositions and proceedings from that. We've had these revelations from the Epstein estate to the House Oversight Committee. And in two occasions now, we've seen Democrats manipulating evidence in an attempt to show that Trump was somehow involved in Epstein's wrongdoing. For example, the first example is when the estate turned over 23,000 of Epstein's emails and to the committee. And Democrats on the committee immediately rushed to release three. Talk about cherry picking.
Yeah.
Three out of 23,000
Hmm.
emails, and one of which said that Virginia, referring to Virginia Jeffrey, who was the late Virginia Jeffrey, Epstein's probably most outspoken victim. Virginia saw Trump at the house. Okay. But Democrats didn't release the email in that form. Instead, they redacted. They put a black block over the name Virginia and wrote the name victim on it.
Yeah.
And everybody looked at the email and said, wow, is this some unknown anonymous victim that we haven't heard about yet? This could be big.
Right.
Now, if it's Virginia Jeffrey, we know that she actually sued Ghislaine Maxwell, and we know that there was a deposition, and she said that she never saw Trump and Epstein, together at the house in Palm Beach or New York or New Mexico or the island or anywhere, and she never saw Trump engage in anything
Right.
uh, untoward. So that's not so much news. So Democrats actually altered the document to redact it and put victim over Virginia Jeffrey's name to try to get a little,
A little bit of
buzz.
traction. A little bit.
Exactly, a
Yeah.
little bit of buzz in the story. So fast forward to this week or last week, the estate has turned over 95,000 pictures,
Right.
photos from Epstein's files, and the Democrats rushed to do the same thing. And in this case, they release a small number of photos, and in particular, there's one in which Trump, who's it's indoors, he's in his normal suit and tie outfit, and he's surrounded by six women, uh, three on either side of him. And instead of seeing their faces, the Democrats put big black boxes over their faces.
Right.
And the idea is, wow, are these underage victims that Trump is hanging out with? Wow,
Hmm.
that would be huge.
Right.
Well, and you even had one commentator on MSNBC, I'm sorry, MS Now,
Right.
say that, this must mean, these redactions must mean that this is an anonymous victim maybe we don't know about. And
Hmm.
Trump is there with Epstein's victims. So that's a huge deal. Well, we find out that it's the Democrats, not the estate, who put the black box over the women's face,
Right.
and that the picture is from the late 90s, so it's close to 30 years ago.
Hmm.
And it was an event at Mar-a-Lago for Hawaiian Tropic suntan lotion. And the women were models, they were all adults.
Yeah.
And this was a business event. And I think the Telegraph tracked down one of these women and said, "Oh yeah, that was a promotional event for Hawaiian Tropic, and that Trump was a complete gentleman." So nothing there.
Yeah.
And here again, Democrats have altered, doctored evidence in an attempt to get just a little hit, and as you
Yeah.
say, a little traction for this story, only for everybody to realize that they're making it up.
Yeah. Well, if you, yeah, and you only make things up when you haven't got anything true. So,
There you go.
would it be a good idea? They seem to return to this after their other sallies against the Trump President Trump falter and stumble. Doesn't seem to work. Would they be best advised to drop this?
My guess is maybe if they don't win the midterm elections, they'll think about that. But
Right.
my guess is they're pretty deep into it, and they also know that there is a part of Trump support, a subset of MAGA that thinks this is a very big deal,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of believes that maybe the country is run by a dark, shadowy ring of very rich pedophiles or something, and they want to see these documents released. So I think you're going to see Democrats continue to push this, much in the way that they did it in the first couple of years with Russia, in the first couple of years of the first Trump administration. It was Russia, Russia, Russia. And
Right.
here there'll be a news story that pops up. Oh, Trump is murdering drug runners. And then everybody will talk about that for a while. And then that kind of fades a bit, and boom, Epstein pops up again. And
Right.
then another story. Oh, Trump says he wants to hang Senator Mark Kelly. Oh, well, everybody talks about that for a while. And
Yeah.
then it fades a bit, and then boom, Epstein. So Epstein is kind of the go-to
Right.
scandal for Democrats, even though they don't have anything so far.
Finally, Byron, let's turn our attention briefly to Capitol Hill. Perhaps not surprisingly, certainly not shockingly, perhaps a bit tiresomely, we find ourselves back in the position where Democrats and Republicans are arguing over Obamacare subsidies, emergency Obamacare subsidies put in place 5 years ago. And this has consequences both for healthcare premiums and for the government staying open. Could you just tell viewers sort of where we are? There's one development in particular that I would like to focus on, and that is just Wednesday morning, 4 Republicans have decided to vote with Hakeem Jeffries to force a vote on what the Democrats want, which is straightforward, no reforms, just throw more money at a failing system. So it's perhaps not surprising we went through all of this just a few weeks ago, a little earlier in the autumn. What's going on, and how does this fall out?
Well, it didn't work for Democrats a few weeks ago in the government shutdown, but you can never say enough that these are extra subsidies for Obamacare, because this really is a part of the story of Obamacare. That is, when the law was created, Democrats knew that it sort of would not make healthcare affordable, that you would have to have the government giving subsidies to insurance companies to pay for people's coverage, and therefore the actual patient, the person, pays less. So
Right.
therefore it's more affordable. Now, what has happened is Obamacare did not slow the increase of healthcare costs. It certainly did not stop the increase in healthcare costs. And then what happened in 2020 and 2021, you have the pandemic come, and Congress is just shoveling money out the door in the trillions of dollars. And so Democrats push the idea of adding on top of the subsidies that already exist
Mm-hmm.
for Obamacare patients, on top of those, to have an additional subsidy. And it'll be temporary because an emergency measure during the COVID thing. And we all know that it expires on December 31st, 2025. That is a week or more from now. So we were always going to have this fight And Democrats are going to say, oh, this is absolutely essential. And anybody who doesn't vote for these extra temporary subsidies is taking healthcare away from the American people.
Right.
And most Republicans are saying, look, if we can't even put an end to spending that was frankly and openly intended to be temporary, then how are we ever going to get spending under control? Now,
Right.
you're going to have some Republicans, on the other hand, who say, look, the fact is, whatever your, conservative economic principles are, the fact is, if you let these extra subsidies expire, there are a lot of people who are going to have to start paying a lot more for their health care premiums. So we just got to fix that. And the way you do it is you do another temporary increase. You say, well, let's have a 2-year extension of these extra subsidies. But at some point, you're going to have to figure out what to do about these rising healthcare costs, because having the government cover the increase in healthcare expenses is just not going to work indefinitely.
Right. It's as though, the Democrats are so invested in Obamacare. It's the signature achievement of the last generation that they don't want to concede that it's actually a dreadful system and hasn't fixed anything, and doesn't make things more affordable unless you subsidize it with the next generation's money and the generation after that. That is to say, with excess government spending and the accumulation of debt. And of course, when one passes a 2-year extension, let's say now, then the Democrats again are in a position to refuse to discuss anything, and we get to the next cliff. So before we get to that cliff, we'll leave it there this week, Byron. Thank you very much for joining me, and
Thank you.
thank all the viewers for joining us again today. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and please join us again next time.